For nearly 20 years, Stacey felt trapped in an abusive relationship, but to the outside world, her husband was a respected police officer.
On Monday, January 24th of 2022, around 1:40 p.m., somebody happened to be passing by a vehicle and noticed two deceased people inside of the car, a male and a female. Both of them had gunshot wounds to the head. Amanda Alvarez-Calo, age 31, was a preschool teacher at Matthew Castile Language Academy in Chicago. She was determined to have been shot to death by her husband, Antonio Alvarez, age 30, who then turned the gun on himself. Her husband was an Illinois state trooper who was off duty at the time of the shooting. The firearm was recovered at the scene. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, Amanda was in the process of divorcing her husband when she was killed, and according to one of her friends, Amanda had already moved out to separate from him at that time. Amanda died about 2 miles away from where she taught school in Chicago, and her death has been ruled a homicide. There wasn't a whole lot of information that I was able to find as far as the history of this couple goes, which really doesn't surprise me considering he was law enforcement. But we did look. I do know that she was Puerto Rican. News media has regurgitated over and over again that she was proud of where she lived and that they're honoring the fact that she was proud of where she lived and she didn't want to leave. And that's great. But in a situation like this, leaving probably would have been smart and maybe even necessary, as we're going to kind of look at later. So while the news media is upholding that as some great banner thing because she was loyal to her community, I would tell you that if that was you, it would be a suggestion to consider leaving. Highly consider leaving, especially where he was law enforcement. The couple leaves behind 2 children, a 4-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl. It's not clear how long they've been married. That wasn't something that was publicly available. I don't know anything really about their history. She went to Whitney Young High School, later graduated from DePaul University, was close to her family. There's really nothing on him that is public, which makes sense. So instead of doing that, what I did is I've looked at law enforcement and domestic violence. I read the number one thing that police officers are arrested for is domestic violence, and that actually domestic violence is extremely common to the point of potentially 1 a day in Chicago alone.
Our I-team uncovers a stunning number of domestic violence complaints against Chicago police officers and an overwhelming lack of disciplinary action resulting from those complaints. Investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy is here with the story.
Ellen, if you are a Chicago police officer accused of domestic violence, Code 600 will be the likely outcome. That is the police jargon for no disciplinary action. In 9 of every 10 domestic violence allegations made against officers by their spouse or children, no disciplinary action is ever taken. And there are many allegations. Chicago police respond to nearly 500 domestic-related calls each day, according to the latest department data. Across the city, calls for help at home. But the I-team uncovered surprising domestic violence complaints about police officers themselves.
It kind of shakes people to the core to have to deal with that reality that this may be the person who's answering your call for help.
Diane Wettendorf is a police domestic violence expert and advocate based in the northern suburbs. For years, she says she helped victims who were abused at the hands of Chicago police.
Domestic violence itself is all about power and control. So when you put the power and control dynamics together with an officer who's used to assuming that role of authority, terribly volatile situation.
In our investigation, the I-team uncovered thousands of domestic violence complaints against Chicago police officers. In a database obtained through the Freedom of Information Act, we found 5,280 domestic violence complaints filed against Chicago police officers since the year 2000. That is more than 340 complaints filed each year. On average, nearly 1 per day.
We know that it's something that oftentimes happens behind closed doors, and so I would suspect that the numbers are even higher than that.
Domestic violence victims advocate Stephanie Love Patterson says many victims of domestic violence involving police officers don't call 911 for help.
When your husband is a police officer, there's fear of, do I make a police call? What happens if I call 911? and some of his colleagues shows up.
Chicago Police Department records reveal another troublesome pattern, according to experts. Following investigation, 92% of the police domestic violence complaints led to no disciplinary action, what the department calls Code 600. The problem caught the attention of investigators from the Department of Justice. They noted in this recent report the majority of domestic violence cases involving officers where there was no real discipline at all. CPD officials say a domestic violence complaint against an officer doesn't mean the officer is guilty. Advocates say that sends a chilling message to victims.
That there's no help available, that the department doesn't take it seriously, and that if they do take it seriously, she might be in worse shape after reporting than beforehand.
It's almost as if we're robots, or they'll be fine, it's the police. Well, police aren't always fine.
Police Union President Dean Angelo.
We have higher rates of alcoholism, higher rates of diabetes, higher rates of divorce, higher rates of suicide.
Angelo cites an old-school mentality at CPD, officers fearful that if they seek counseling, they'll face repercussions at work.
We know morale's in the toilet. We are way behind the times in recognizing the needs and programs sufficient enough to meet the demands of policing in 2017. And it's a shame, because the last thing you want to do is not do something and then wind up calling the coroner.
It's difficult and scary to get away from a domestic violence perpetrator anyway, and much more so if they happen to be one of the people that's supposed to be there to help you. I just want you guys to know that I did actually put this video out already, and then it was blocked because I added part of Alexis DeCaney's story, because Crime Watch Daily did a really good job of interviewing her, and it made it really personal because you could see her face and you could hear her voice and you could see the fear and things that a lot of times we are not able to get to capture on video, but they blocked me because of copyright issues. So I just want to make you aware of this case. Alexis DeCaney met Sergeant Eric Paul. He was a college instructor where she was going to school for criminal justice. They met, eventually they started dating, and he left his wife of like 18, 19 years and 2 daughters so that he could be with Alexis, because he told her that she was the only woman that he ever loved. I wanted that part in there because it's important, it's significant to see how they sort of love bomb you. You are their entire world. And then they dated for a while. He had a drinking issue. She talked about in the interview about how the community didn't necessarily know who he really was, that when it came to his career, he was rock solid. They had sort of a toxic relationship for about 1.5 years. He actually broke up with her, started dating somebody else, and she talked about how when he broke up with her, like there might have been a little bit of her that missed him, but there was a bigger part of her that was sort of relieved because she knew it was the right thing. And I feel like that's probably really a common feature with these toxic relationships. Like there's something inside of you and of me that knows that this person is not good for us, but we're just not willing to deal with it. And then when something happens like a breakup, I mean, it sucks to lose this person if you have a connection with them, but there's something inside of you that says, I feel like I dodged a bullet. Pun intended. So he starts dating somebody else. Eventually she gets to the point where she's willing to date somebody else, and then he doesn't handle that well. Apparently they had still been talking, and she said, it's not okay for you to continue to text me like this. I've started seeing somebody else. She wakes up in the middle of the night that night to glass shattering because he's trying to break into her house, and he texts her and tells her that he's not leaving until she comes outside. So she goes outside. He puts his service weapon to her head, and she thinks she's gonna die. And then he puts it to his head and says that he will kill himself, that he can't live without her. He broke up with his girlfriend that day, that he doesn't want anybody but her. She's the only woman he's ever loved. So in that moment, the smartest thing for her to do, she felt like, was to tell him, okay, fine, I'll take you back. The next day, he's threatening this guy that she had been talking to. You need to stop talking to him or I'm going to kill you and I'm going to kill him. So she stops talking to him. They get back together. They're seeing each other for a while. Thanksgiving Day 2014, he goes to his family's place. She goes to her family's place. Then he calls her later and says, hey, do you want to watch a movie? So she puts her son to bed. She's a single mom. He comes over. They watch a movie. He's very drunk when he gets there. After the movie, he becomes violent. He ends up assaulting her, and the last thing that she remembers before she blacked out because he's choking her was him flipping her over and pulling down her pants. He made a deal with the prosecuting attorney, and so he went to prison for 4 years. He served 4 years of prison time after over a year of stalking her, and it says other women, and assaulting her, strangling her, raping her. He gets 4 years in prison. Threatening to kill her and putting his service weapon to her head. 4 years in prison, but they gave him 5 years of probation with an ankle monitor when he got out. And so she filed a suit against 2 different cities for them refusing to deal properly with this law enforcement officer who was clearly abusing her, stalking her, threatening her. She had tons of text messages. In this interview, she said that the average was 200 to 500 times a day that he was texting her. Tons of proof. So was there law enforcement bias? It would certainly appear that way. If you want to go and look up that video, it definitely was impactful to me. I watched it a couple of years ago. I mean, if Chicago's police are getting daily reports, they're not all killing, but it can be extremely difficult to live with. And let's get back to the video. It's difficult and scary to get away from a domestic violence perpetrator anyway, and much more so if they happen to be one of the people that's supposed to be there to help you. And even more so still when that group of people maintains sort of a brotherhood of keeping each other's backs, so to speak, instead of actually punishing this crime when it happens.
Nearly 130 women have now come forward since 2019 with claims of being raped, beaten, controlled, sometimes for decades.
Why isn't he being held accountable for how he treated us and the pain that all of us went through?
What links all of these women is that the alleged abuser was their serving police officer partner.
Everyone is linked in the police. It's a boys' club. Police are supposed to be there to be trusted, and they're not. I can't trust them.
A former police commander told Channel 4 News the sheer volume of cases was an epidemic. We have independently spoken to 14 women. All claim there had been a failure by detectives to investigate their own officers. Some even alleged police used their power and status to control and manipulate cases. Many told us there was a culture of cover-ups where survivors felt silenced.
Let's just go over a few things, suggestions for if you happen to be involved intimately with law enforcement officer who happens to be abusing you. Whether that's domestic violence, whether that is emotional abuse, whether that's sexual abuse, whether that's stalking or threatening your life. All of these things are potentially applicable. This is when the batterer is a cop by the purple berets. If you're not ready to leave, number 1, open a safe deposit box, they suggest, and then begin to fill it with papers that you'll need to get out. So ID, passports, birth certificates, money, car registration, insurance papers, whatever documents are important, as well as extra cash if you can do that. Don't count on using credit cards. They may be canceled once you leave, and I would second that. You definitely want to, if you're going to use a debit card when you leave, go immediately and get money out, because it's not going to stay. Open a bank account in your name only. If you can do that, make a safety plan, regardless of whether your abuser is law enforcement or not. That is important. Take or have a friend take pictures of your injuries, especially with law enforcement of any kind. Any pictures or video or audio recordings that you can have as evidence is going to be helpful. Document the things that happen anyway, but evidence is extremely important here. Keep any communication. This suggests notes, cards, text messages, threats, etc. Put copies of those in your safe deposit box. If you need medical care after getting assaulted, It says get a copy of the doctor's report or the hospital report, even if you lied about how your injuries happened. Get something documenting what the injuries were, the date, etc. And it recommends that you start making friends outside of the law enforcement community so that you build up a support network. Or once you decide to get out, find an advocate who works independent from police agencies. So like here in this community, we have a crisis center as well as victims advocates through the law enforcement office. So you can do something like that. Report the violence to the district attorney. Avoid making multiple statements to police or to the prosecution. The more interviews and statements you submit, the more the chances are for the defense attorney to turn slight differences in wording into contradictory statements. Tell law enforcement this in your initial interview and ask that the interview be all-inclusive and that it be taped. It suggests getting a restraining order or order of protection. While this is only a piece of paper, it says that it can at least give you a way of getting immediate temporary custody of your children. Report the violence to internal affairs within the police department. Find a good family law attorney. And it's possible that you might need to go public with it.
He can be all like polite and smarmy and do all the cheesy smiles and all that sort of stuff. But he's a monster. He still scares me to this day.
Loved ones remembered her as a devoted educator, a steadfast friend, and a warm and genuine soul. Colleagues would say that she was fiercely committed to the students' well-being, inside and outside of the classroom. She was active in her community and worked with after-school programs, community gardens, and in the violence prevention group Safe Kids Chicago. She helped mentor kids on the wrong path. Amanda's godmother, Susan Sadlowski Garza, told the Sun-Times, "Everyone loved Amanda. She was the most amazing young woman. Amanda had so many friends. Everyone loved to be around her. I can't even tell you. It's just so tragic. This was her mom's only daughter. I only have 3 brothers. She was the closest thing I ever had to a sister," Katie Garza, a close childhood friend, said. Tyler Garza, Katie's brother, said the 31-year-old mom was a star. She was a shining light. She would walk into a room, everyone would look toward her, and she'd put a smile on their faces. She had a special way of connecting with people, he said. She really was one of those special people that you remember for the rest of your life. She had such a huge impact on so many people with her outgoing and loving personality. Kate and Tyler Garza organized a GoFundMe campaign for Amanda's 2 young children and to help pay for funeral costs. Within 24 hours, the page had raised more than $96,000 of its $125,000 goal. If you knew Amanda, you knew she was an absolute joy to be around. Her smile was infectious, and her unmistakable laugh radiated in every room she walked into. She was loved by many and adored by classmates, friends, and coworkers alike, the GoFundMe page said. If you believe that your life is in danger, please contact the Domestic Violence Hotline. I'll put the number on the screen. Until I see you again, please stay safe.
He sort of love bombed you at the beginning.
He did, yeah.
And then his behaviour changed.